Cherokee 670. It is hard to make.
Yeah, the Jeep Cherokee line is those Jeeps.
I've had a few that the electronics, always like the large ones and stuff like that were really expensive.
Somebody told me that, like, the only major difference between, like, say, a Buick and a GM, I mean, or like a Chevy or like a Buick or a GMC is, yeah, you're gonna have a little bit nicer wheels and things like that, but it's like the headlamps. You go and replace your headlamps on like a GMC, and you're gonna pay 3 times as much as you would if you had a Chevy. And so somebody told me, don't buy one of that. I got this because all you're doing is just paying for it. And I'm like, I ended up buying a Ford Explorer anyway, but, I don't know, I did not realize that until somebody I knew had to get their light replaced. They're nice vehicles, they are nice, but you gotta do the trucks are really nice.
They went for a few years, except for this, where parts were in China, other than like the badges. And then, I guess people got irritated with it because
I had a lot of trouble last
then
week.
they actually split back.
Because they're
Yeah, because we had a relatively new Buick, GMC, Cadillac dealership in Columbia, and I mean, they were selling cars. We had to pay for them. And where we were sales tax with them, we got so many months, whatever. And we got to shop their annual for the month.
I got the allergy shots today.
I mean, I saw one just before I left. It was in the email blast. They just replaced.
I used to
$1,000 for their GMC.
It's
like a house to a lot of people.
coffee, stay away.
And they depreciate so fast. You know?
There's a bonfire on the other side of town.
That's Robert Eagle.
A new Navigator set right there.
Do the allergy
No,
test. Give me a shot.
That's a little excessive.
It's amazing. I just happened to look at it, I was like, really?
I mean, they're not, you can get an RV for that from
Well, I was having nasal infection.
Oh, no, it is, you're right, it is. It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's actually some interesting facts that came in the research on it. We just found something today. It was about some case law or something. It has to do with the state statute, which I wasn't aware of. But I'm going to believe
We gotta get something.
to do with the state law that's actually has guidelines where.
Yes, sir.
We're ready to go. Okay, welcome to the May 14th work session of the Abingdon Town Council. Kim, would you call it on?
Mr. Bradley?
Here.
Ms. Quetch? Here. Mr. Webb?
Here.
Ms. Patterson?
Here.
Mayor Craig?
Here.
I croaked a little bit, I am here.
First item is public comments. Do we have anybody sign up?
Yes, sir.
And that's part of the public, I think.
He signed up to talk, at item 4, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I just want to know if you want to speak on public comment.
No, sir, I'm all right.
Reports from the town manager, discussion regarding proposed changes to credit card policy, section by.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
Fine, how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. All right, Kim, if you would just take one and pass it around, please. This is a copy of the proposed credit card policy that has been reviewed. So once you all have that, I believe it was in your packet.
This is different than what you're sitting up there.
Yeah, it has the highlighted section, yeah. So this has been reviewed by the department heads, it's been reviewed by the Department of Finance to ensure that it does follow the policy regarding the Bank of America Works system. And it's also been reviewed by Mr. Morani. On item number 3, you'll see that there is a highlighted section talking about $2,500 is the maximum transactional limit allowed, not to exceed individual cardholder limits. This was added to the policy to ensure that the department heads and employees understood that none of their transactions could exceed the $2,500 limit. Their card may have a higher limit, but a specific transaction cannot exceed $2,500. Again, that was placed on item number 3 and item number 5. Some of the items that you'll see in red and the red strike through were just terminology changes, things that made more sense to our specific town. Under item number 9, we've added some verbiage there, again specific to how we handle the credit card process, which is mandated by the Commonwealth of Virginia under the Bank of America Works program. Going on to the second page again, we have some terminology updates, and the yellow highlights were just verbiage corrections. Page 3, same things there, just verbiage corrections highlighted in yellow, and items specific to the finance department and how they handle the transactions themselves. Now if you're flipping over onto page 4, the bottom red sentence talks about the program that is utilized by the town, and there is a hyperlink there that takes you to the entire program that is mandated by the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's approximately 58 or 59 pages long. And then the very last page is just an acknowledgement form that any employee who uses a Town of Abington charge card has to sign. The training will be provided by a member of the finance department. The member of the finance department will go over this document with each individual user. The acknowledgement form will be signed, and then that will be kept on file to ensure that everyone understands how the credit card policy works. Does anyone have any specific questions about the policy itself?
Is this the first time we've had a credit card policy in Town of Abington?
No, ma'am. Everyone, the credit card policy's been housed in the finance department, not part of the personnel manual. So it's something that Chuck and his department have handled within their department.
The $2,500 limit is for a single charge, right?
Correct. It cannot exceed.
The total balance can go over $2,500.
Right, and
Or cannot.
the limit is dependent upon the specific user tied to the card. So someone who works for maybe Parks and Recreation, their card limit may be $500, whereas Kevin's card limit may be $5,000. And again, Chuck would have that information in the finance department.
So this credit card policy will apply to all employees, is that correct?
Any employee who has an actual card. All 10 employees do not have cards, so I think Mr. Jimmy has maybe a couple of points on that.
Yeah, here's my initial thoughts on this. I mean, I think the policy is very well written. I made a few minor suggestions, and I needed some points of clarification that her and Chuck were able to. And then I discussed with Cam as well about, what we should do with this policy. My first reaction was, I don't think it belongs in the employee handbook. I'm not saying it can't be a policy, but typically, it's not really an HR policy, it's not really a benefit, or it's really a procedure. And so I asked Cam, I don't mind if the council approves it, as long as it's just not incorporated into the handbook, because it just doesn't really belong there. His feedback to me in our discussion was, well, does it even need to be approved by the town council? I'm open for discussion on that, and I don't mind developing this policy and having it implemented by the town manager and you reviewing it and seeing what's there. But my concern is that if we have to somehow deviate from this, and I've gotten final say by the council. I don't want to be in violation of anything. Like I'll give you an example. I mean, this $2,500 is a good number, and I know that Chuck explained to me that the statute is more liberal in the sense that it is higher, and then we've tried to tailor this based on those guidelines to our situation. That's why some revisions have been, I think BVU was, we had also gotten a sample policy from BVU. But one issue is the $2,500. Hypothetically, I use IT for example, okay, and this truly does happen, it came up at a staff meeting. He could have to go online and buy a switch, and we could have a switch go down, and it might need to be done like that. I don't want any obstacles from getting that piece of equipment to the town of Abingdon, because I know what it's like when we have down equipment. I've experienced that, and I don't want any delays. So I was thinking about working with Stacy and Chuck when Chuck gets back to maybe modify this, but you can kind of see, I just think you want to make sure that there is a policy and that it's being enforced. And if I can assure you that that is going to happen, then we could decide whether or not it needs to be in the handbook or whether it needs to be approved by the council. I would recommend just against that, only so it allows me to make changes if I need to. I'll be completely transparent about what's in the policy. In fact, I was talking to Stacy, I would actually like to develop a standard operating procedure manual for employees. So things that aren't necessarily in the employee handbook, which are not general policies, benefits, and things like that. So hey, what's our procurement policy? A lot of it's going to be developed by what's in the state law, and so every employee would have that, whether it applies to them or not. So anyways, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. I don't want to take any final action on this yet, because I do want to talk to Chuck about this limit here, because that does concern me about.
Well, I wouldn't have any problem with
Yeah.
having the employees with the 2,500, but having somebody over that, like the manager or
Right,
the
right.
finance director,
Right.
knows that they can go above that. They're,
Right. So that would be my recommendation, is that me as the town manager, I will sort of promulgate rules and guidelines for employees, and this is B1. I mean, this is an important policy, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I think since we've had one, it's been internal, but maybe it wasn't widely known, or it was more internal. But I'd like to get it to where it's more formal, and it goes, okay, town manager has issued a new policy, section whatever, and it goes in the book, and we'll amend them as we develop new policies, because as laws change, as new situations arise.
I believe what brought this up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it was reported to us in an anonymous letter that credit cards are being abused.
Right.
So then we decided, hey, we
Right.
need a credit card
Right.
policy.
I understand that. I've heard that, and I just need to make sure that there's proper oversight of what's going
And
on.
back before Donna and Derek came on board, I had asked about policies in general and also a credit card policy, but we didn't have one at that time, and I
Okay.
believe to rephrase, well, if I could rephrase the question, is this the first one the council has tried to get into play? I believe that would be yes, because Chuck had a non-formal, I guess you would, policy. I mean, it's not formal in front of the council, that the Bank of America, I believe, issued, where they work together, and he sent me a copy of that. I was trying to find it here on my email, but I don't go back till 2018. So I think this is the first one we've seen.
This is the first one that has been drafted, thank you Cam for sending that
Yes,
over.
thank you.
And put in front of you as an actual policy. Yes, I don't know what discussions you may have had with Chuck about any other credit card issues.
And so that's that. And the other thing I think that we had talked about, discussed as a council, about purchases that were needing to be watched, and I'm not sure.
Well, I
Go ahead, Donna.
believe the previous council received reports every month.
Right.
And it broke down the credit card, each person on what they spent.
Is it
Council
just in the
received-
aggregate now? Is it not,
But we're not receiving
Well,
those
I don't
now.
recollect having seen
I don't
anything.
I've seen
So I
some of their
think, I think
packets.
maybe we need to go back
Is
to
that since
that,
we've
that
been
way
here?
just.
well, that's something that I can implement, I mean, I can implement that, we don't need to.
Okay.
So if you want, I can get with the finance department
Yeah.
and if there's, what I don't wanna do is create much more work for the staff.
Right.
But, I mean, I'm familiar with doing that. We had,
Okay.
I've worked with finance people in the past that have just produced a list of, here are the credit card purchases, and I have no issues doing it.
Yeah, I've seen them in our packets. They're kind of yellow and white lines,
Okay.
and we've been able to follow some of that.
Okay.
But I think what
But
you
not since we've been on
Not-
council.
not
Yeah,
since
we-
they've been on
I'm
council.
sure that we have. I'm sure
I
of
don't
it.
think I've seen
I've
any
never
of
seen
that.
it.
Well, let's find out. We'll find out from Chuck and
Yeah,
see
I'll
what
go
was,
back and,
what has been
packets, but I'm
distributed
sure
to the
that we
council, and if
have.
it's not there, or maybe it's intermittent, and maybe they're.
Yeah, they may be.
I got one lengthy list of stuff with numbers in it, but I couldn't tell what it was.
I'm just
I
saying a
couldn't- I couldn't
breakdown
read
of
the whole
each
160
card,
pages,
so
so I
it breaks
can't
down
read it.
expenses. You don't have to.
And get
But
back to this.
I'm all about accountability.
No, I understand that. I understand that. Hey, if we're not hiding anything, we should have no
That's
reason to
right,
wanna
no
share it with
reason.
you. So I have no issues doing that.
Getting back to this, I see no reason why the council should adopt this and set it in stone when it's better used as an informal policy, although.
Well, it's a formal policy, but it's
Although
just
enforced by-
adopted by the, yeah, enforced
Although
by the town
enforced as
manager.
such by the
Yeah.
town manager, and I hope you will sign it and.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
And
yeah,
make that note.
yeah. No,
you know,
it will
make
be
that
formal.
note That it is the town's policy.
Yeah, I
I
think the two,
absolutely, I absolutely agree with Al, and if the council doesn't have an objection, you
Right.
finish the
Yeah.
drafting up, and be happy with it.
And I'll send you the final version just so you can see what it looks like.
Is
It won't
everybody
be that
okay
much
with
different.
that?
I also applaud your efforts here. I think
Yeah.
it's,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
good
you
set of
very much.
well, I think the two broader issues, and these are things that we've talked about a lot, are there are lots of things that have gone on here that people know how they work, but they aren't written down for anybody to
Right.
find. And if you say, where's the credit card policy, then we did it a certain way, and Chuck could explain it, and he had some links to things that were under the state program and that sort of thing, but it wasn't a formalized policy. And then the second thing is what Jimmy had brought up originally. I mean, you guys have delegated pretty much all the authority to run the town to the town manager. So I think this is a town manager function. I think it's perfectly good for him to bring this before you and make sure that you bless it to the extent it needs to be blessed, but I think it's ultimately up to him. My other concern is just making sure, when people come on as new hires, then they get the employee handbook and they sign that they've received it and that sort of thing. If we're gonna have a separate section of things that
Absolutely.
are policies and procedures, that we just make sure that they acknowledge that they have read them and they are gonna follow them too. So,
Yep.
but we can do that.
Mhm.
Okay, two things, if you could explain like the pro and con to the council adopting it versus us not adopting it, I'd like to hear that. Either Mr. Morani or Cam, please.
Well, I think that this is a employee management function and not an ordinance, it's not a resolution, it's not something that's really at the council level, it's something for the town manager to do, and I think it's good that you guys see it, but I don't think it's something that you necessarily have to, or maybe even have the authority to approve.
Okay, and the second thing, I didn't hear Donna what she was saying a few minutes ago because there was a couple people talking, but what did you want to do about watching the purchases?
Well, there's a report that used to go in the packets, a breakdown of the credit card expenses and people's, what they charged.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'd sort of like to, I said, it's just really about accountability.
Right, and transparency, I understand, yeah.
So you don't want to designate someone to check
Well,
that?
No, I think this report can be generated, it might already be in existence, and I'll just make sure that it gets to the council in some form or fashion, whether it's in the packet or whether it's distributed some other way. I'll make sure that happens, that's not a problem.
That way,
Mhm.
when we get these anonymous letters, we have it right in front of us,
Well, I've told all anonymous letters to stop, there will be no
Well, I'm
anonymous.
just saying, hopefully.
I've told
there won't be.
everybody, and not all the anonymous
Yeah.
people, I've told them.
Oh, good.
Kevin, did you hear that?
I'm not anonymous, everybody knows who I am.
Okay, are we done with item one? All right, item two, discussion regarding workman's compensation policy.
Can do this, okay? Thank you. Okay, prior to Mr. Vidum leaving, he asked that the workers' compensation policy be reviewed in the manual. So what I have done is I have pulled the language directly from the VACOR insurance manual. VACOR, of course, is the company that handles our workers' compensation claims, and provided a little bit more in-depth information about the workers' compensation policy. I've sent it to Ramesh, and he's reviewed it and given his okay, but we did, for the first time today, meet with the department heads to talk about it. And the highlighted section in bullet point number 2 brought up a little bit of healthy discussion. So Jimmy and I are actually, because this is just a draft, Jimmy and I are actually going to sit down and look at some other localities and how they handle workers' compensation when employees are out for less than 7 days, because workers' compensation does not pick up until the 7th day. So we're going to be looking at this and what other localities are doing to ensure that we're in line in doing what's best for our employees and the town. And I believe Jimmy.
Yeah, she pretty much summed it up. I'm hesitant to, this is a good policy, it's a very sound policy. Me coming in here new, I've reviewed it, I've gotten some feedback from department heads, I just want to do my due diligence and talk with Stacy a little bit more and talk to some other communities. I'm also coming from a very, very employee-friendly state in terms of workers' compensation. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, we even get to make our policy up. Most things where I'm coming from are, this is the way it is, and the state or the cities can't do anything. So this one I do believe, with it be, really the workers' compensation insurance, it is a benefit, so that should be in the employee handbook in my opinion. So. But that was just probably the one only area that we were going to look into a little bit further.
So this is a work in progress?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
but I don't think it's going to change substantially other than that one section. It could end up staying the same.
To put it in the employee's handbook, it's gotta go through the council. doesn't it?
Yes, I believe it does, doesn't it? Or do we not?
I think traditionally.
Traditionally. To me, you're establishing benefits for the town, you're expending money. I think that's appropriate for that to go
You
before the
think you'll
council.
be ready for the June 3rd meeting, or do you wanna?
Let me just, let me, if not, it'll be, I don't know if this is something that's an urgent matter. So if I feel like we need to bring it before the June 3rd meeting, if we have enough time to do it, we can. I'm gonna be gone parts of next week. But if not, if it doesn't change, then we can bring it up for action at the next meeting.
We'll get your final recommendation
Yeah.
before the, whatever meeting.
Yeah, right, yeah,
Okay.
we will. And if it doesn't change and we decide not to change it and it's ready to go before June 3rd, we'll just get it on the agenda for that.
Does anyone have any specific questions about this policy?
Is that one provision already in there, in the current version?
Which
Is the highlighted portion of the current?
It's what was handed out by VACOR, but it's not in the personnel manual now. The only piece in the personnel manual is the company
Correct
nurse
me if I'm
section.
wrong, the only thing in the personnel manual is
Company
this.
nurse down.
None of that is in here. But it has been a practice we've been following.
Yes.
We've been following this
Correct.
practice, just hasn't been in
In
writing
writing.
formally. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Item 3, discussion regarding blight policy. James Moran.
Okay, I remember if I printed out that section of the code or not.
Yes.
Did everybody get it? Okay. I don't know, maybe I didn't bring mine, I didn't realize it. Okay, section, so the reason why this section is printed out, I've talked to Kim and to Kevin about the abatement of nuisances, specifically tall grass, weeds that we've been mowing. And we're trying to get some consistency with how we assess an administrative fee. A lot of times this involves several different staff members, it involves time, especially if it even involves police. If we have to have somebody, unfortunately, escort another town employee to the property to mow, because people get very angry sometimes and you don't know what's gonna happen when they see somebody else out there mowing their property. It's kind of been, it's been implemented, it's been assessed, but there really hasn't been a clear authority to assess this fee, and my goal is to make sure we incorporate that into the code. And I think, and this is something I could discuss with Cam after the meeting, but I just think it's as simple as inserting a sentence into this section of the municipal code for the accounting for abatement costs. It does give us the ability to, which as we do now, charge for labor costs, which I think this section gives us the authority. It specifies the cost of labor and other reasonable charges for equipment, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we just use the standard VDOT rates for rental equipment for mowers and whatnot.
That's correct.
So those are pretty, I mean, those are pretty, I think those are covered in here, but what's not really in here is that administrative fee, which in a way, if we don't do that, then it's, people are just gonna be like, well, if I'm just, the town can just mow it every time for me, and we are absorbing that cost as well. So I think we determined that based on the amount of staff time is involved, and sometimes needing law enforcement, that $150 would be, and I think we've been assessing between $100 and $150 as it is right now. So I would just ask that we include that in there, and if you wanna chime in anywhere, let me know, but I think it's just as simple as, we just need to have that in the code, is really what it comes down to.
So you want to put in the specific amount, is what you mean?
Yeah, I think because our concern was if we left it too open, then, I mean, there could be, I threw out there to say up to 150, but my concern is, for that is then it becomes somewhat discretionary, and then some situations we might not do as much. I'd rather err on the side of the resident, but then again, then you're putting a lot of discretion in the hands of staff people, which, you know, it gets arbitrary sometimes, and so I don't want there to, I want it to be fair and consistent. So that was my recommendation, is to make it just a flat fee. That was
I didn't
Steph's.
understand it. Are you saying that you're gonna add $150 to the, that seems high, to the labor and?
No, it's onto the invoice. Well, this is typical. I mean, from where I've been, you know, managing, where the town, the staff time that it takes to coordinate, line up the mower and line up the staff time, the personnel time, the recording the time that it takes to record the lien, if we record it at the courthouse, it's no different than getting a building permit. I mean, somebody pays.
I understand,
Yeah.
I just don't understand the $150.
On top of what the labor costs were and the equipment costs were. That is correct. Yeah, that is what the proposal is.
Mr.
Yeah.
Rainbow, I'm actually, one quick comment.
Don't forget to
You-
come.
You want me to come up front? I'll be.
It seems a little-
I think it might help.
Speak on my.
I understand, yeah. But maybe.
I know the mayor wanted to see me, so. No, let me give you just a real quick, so you understand what we're into. By the time Jason and Mason go and do the investigation, post it, put their time and labor in it, Kim's and reporting it, I go back and after my guys take care of it, we take care of it, we put that in there. We're not recovering any of that cost. Our direct cost, as Mr. Moran said, we use the VDOT and FEMA labor rates and the standard equipment rates. So I brought an example of one of the properties that we just mowed, and with a truck, trailer, the mower, blower, and string trimmers, okay? That only equates time-wise to $77 that's the equipment rate. We charge labor rate at $20 an hour to two people, so minimum two, so that was $40. And then, so if we don't assess the administrative fee, then we're almost giving it away. We don't want to be in the business of competing against one of our local contractors who could mow properties and all that, even though these are properties that nobody is foreclosed or other reasons why people aren't mowing them. That's why the town has the responsibility to go back and maintain these. So what we're just basically suggesting and to support what Mr. Moran is saying is the administrative fee, the $150, is to cover all the expense that is not covered with the actual mowing operation. This is the town's side that we need to incorporate and to recover those costs. And that's what we're missing.
I understood all that. What I don't understand is why that amounts to $150. And here's my concern. If somebody gets a bill for $150 plus all the mowing, are they really gonna pay that, or are we gonna be flooding the courthouse with liens?
Well, we're not really mowing people's property who are typically there as a resident. We're dealing with properties that are vacated or
Their estate.
their estate or condemned.
The whole lot.
I'll be honest with you, Mayor,
It's
we
always
expect
the
to
same.
not get this money back until I mean, we don't, we send them the bill, but more than likely, they're not gonna pay it, we will recover those costs.
There's about
Five or six.
We're only talking about 5 properties that we're dealing with.
It's
I'm
gonna
not
be
Yeah.
the
worried about
same
that.
property.
But we're establishing the precedent moving forward, because next year, what could happen, you could end up with 10. But what we're trying to do is establish the policy now that we can enforce and move forward with. So, I hope that gives a little bit of explanation.
Yeah.
Well, I thought so.
Yeah, so that is the expectation, and it's very common in most communities that you send the bill, and if they're not taking care of their property, more times than not, they're not gonna pay the bill, you file the lien, and then when there's a transaction, that's when the town gets their money back. I feel like it's a cost of doing business that we have to do it, because I feel the residents who live next to these properties, they're taxpayers just like everybody else, and they should not be subject to seeing blighted properties, so I just feel that it's something, we should be proactive on.
Al said the same thing I did. I don't think either one of us have a problem with it. We just think it's a little bit steep.
Yeah, I understand, well, I
I mean, you
mean,
want it to be steep in a way, I mean,
Not any more than $100, I think.
That's what I was thinking,
Sure.
about $100.
well, I mean, we're not in the commercial mowing business.
Right.
You want it to be steep in a way that it's an incentive for people to take care of the property.
We don't want it, we don't want to be in
This
that
is a
business.
Yeah.
penalty.
I think we talked about doing 100, but
I just want to be
when,
fair, that's.
right, I understand, initially we thought 100, when we talked about it, we discussed when sometimes we do need police officers, and then we thought, well, those times, then we charge a little bit more. And then I got into, well, when do you charge more and when do you don't? So, because there are times where we do need law enforcement protection, I just said, let's just make it the 150 then, so that was.
Why don't you just, I suggest, just make it 100, and say if we have to have a police officer out there, it's gonna be 150.
Well, that's what we talked about too, but I don't know if we wanted to get that detailed in the ordinance,
Well, I
but,
don't think it's fair to somebody that you didn't
yeah,
have a police officer.
I don't disagree, I understand.
We're only mowing these properties, by the time they get posted and notified and all the process,
Yeah.
we're mowing them about every 6 weeks. So you can imagine how tall the grass gets, so we're only mowing about 4 times.
Well,
a year.
let's do this.
Maximum.
Let's make it 100. Let's make it 100, okay? As we do these this summer, what with BB in here, I'll get a good feel for how much labor is involved in some of these and how many we're needing police on. And then if we need to revisit it next year, we can.
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
are you good with that, Kevin? For now? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's just stay there, and then we'll be able to make a better evaluation, because I agree, I don't wanna charge people something that they're not deserved, so.
And if we're having to
Yeah.
mow the same ones over and over again every year. is
There could be
something-
less
Is
times.
there something we could do with that?
I think a couple of properties this year are actually being sold, and I think there's also some condemnation that's happening on a couple of them, so I mean,
Typically, what has happened is we've waited for the county to sell it pursuant to their tax lien, but some of those have taken a decade.
Right.
And we've checked on a few that we've had recently. Some of the background work is if they are in a state, there are 15 family members that are far-flung, and we've had to reach out, and Mason gets nasty calls, and we make
It's a
send
very
letters.
lengthy
and
process.
There's a lot of things just to get to the point where you're even contacting the correct people while the grass is growing and that sort of thing. But ultimately, the lien goes on the property, and the only way for us to get our money back is to sell the property. But we've been relying on the county to enforce their lien, and we sort of piggyback our lien on top of theirs. But
Okay.
it's an expensive, long process.
I heard county.
You can call Mr. Parker, we can have it back in.
Well, okay, well, so if everybody's okay with, I'll
Yeah.
ask Cam to prepare an amendment to this section of the code, if you think that's the most appropriate. We did talk about, in our meeting with some of my staff, about having a separate fee schedule in a different, it's gonna be a long process, but for now, I don't like burying all these different fees all across the entire municipal code. It's not very efficient, but in this instance, something that we wanna implement right away, so we'll get it in there for now and address that.
Well, before you do it, let me ask one more question.
Okay.
I had an incident in my neighborhood where somebody let the trees, it's a vacant house,
Mhm.
and the trees grew obstructed sight distance where it was not safe to drive around the curve. Does that happen very often? Do you all have anything like that, and how would that be handled?
It does. If it's encroaching in the right of way, Mr. Mayor, we can have Public Works go out and trim it back.
So you're not gonna charge for that, right?
No, because it's in the right of way.
That's what I think. Okay, I just want to be clear on that. All right. All right, is everybody okay? Al?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Moving on to item 4, discussion regarding fuel spin stabilization. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, appreciate your time. I've asked Matt Bundy from Bundy A&E, who we consulted with, to draft the RFP and did all the engineering work on the stabilization plan to come in and give you all an overview.
Yeah, so what we did was drafted up a set of bid documents and put those out to bid last month. The bids were due at the beginning of May. We did not have any interest in general contractors bidding it. We have basically two parts of this bid. One is to install micro piles around the existing concrete footings and tie those micro piles to that. They would be socketed down to the rock and hold the footings up. And the second part of that would be to put in washers to hold the walls together. And so the way we bid it originally was through a general contractor. So they would hire someone to do the micro piles and then they would come in and do those washers. We had some interest from people wanting to bid the micro pile part because that's the majority of the work financially. But no one wanted to bid it as a general contractor. And so we received 0 bids, and now we're in the process of contacting the people about doing the micro piles. 2 companies is Remco and Hayward Baker. And we're getting quotes from them to just do the micro pile portion. And then it should be pretty easy to get a quote from some general contractors to do the washer portion. And so Remco is promised to be the end of this week. They would get me a quote on the micro piles, and I haven't heard back from Hayward Baker on time yet.
Did you say Hayward Baker?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of micropiles did you specify, Matt?
They're steel, 5-inch diameter driven. That way it's, because since theirs shrinks well, the push piles has a tendency they could possibly come apart. So these would be continuous all the way down to the rock.
The micropiles go all the way around the foundation?
All the 2-story part that has an existing concrete footing under it. And so there's a part under there's a 1-story part in the back where we would really have to do some serious demolition to get in there and try to drive piles, because it's a big machine that will just drive that into the rock.
Really?
So we elected at this point to just do the part that's 2 stories and it does have an existing concrete footing under it. We went and did tests to make sure that it did have concrete footings under it this fall. And so they can just drive that in and bolt it to the concrete. So it's not as huge of a project or as invasive.
Okay, any questions, council? Any more questions?
Anything we need to do with this? Not do?
This was just an update. Okay.
Yep. Just have to.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you, Matt, appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
I'll be in touch.
Discussion regarding permits for parades and costs, Miranda.
So this was an issue I'm just getting familiar with, but I wanted to discuss it and tell you where we're at with it at the staff level. It's my understanding that we have a policy on assessing fees to entities, organizations that want to have events, whether it be parades, anything that would use the public right-of-way, public facilities, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, and it involves maybe personnel as well, whether we can block out cities or town streets or put up barricades or whatnot. We have not really been applying that policy. Now, it's a small town, I realize it, we have a lot of community events, so I think over time, it's just something that, that we've overlooked. And what I'd like to do is, I was really gonna ask the council, either we do one or we do none, you do them all or you do none. But before before I do that, I want to have a little bit better picture as to how much staff time we're utilizing at these events, specifically the ones that that are regular, that are having right now. So what I'd like to do is, and I didn't talk to Kevin about that, we met yesterday, but I hadn't talked to him before this meeting. What I'd like to do is at least wait a little while, get information from staff to determine how many resources we're using for each event, how many in Public Works, how many in the Parks Department, how many in Recreation, how many in Law Enforcement, Police Department, and then really then at that point bring it to the council and make a recommendation. At this point, I just don't feel like I can adequately say we need to charge everybody, because I think if you do that, you're gonna put some organizations in a difficult position. And I don't wanna be that person coming in and starting off. And so, I mean, I'm interested in listening to your thoughts, but
Well, have we checked to see what other people do? Other
we can
towns?
do that. I have no problem finding out how other towns do it. I know, at least in my experience, where I've been, we have charged, but we have some rather large events here, and I get it, when you're bringing people into the community also, you're bringing in a lot of tax revenue, so like those meals taxes and things like that. So I understand the dilemma of, do we charge this organization for this particular event that's going to bring thousands and thousands of people in? So, but yet we're also, with some of these organizations, giving them financial resources and donations and what. So it's not an easy decision. I certainly didn't want to be the one to make that decision on my own, certainly not at this stage. But we can do that. Yeah, we can find out for special events what other surrounding communities are doing as well.
Well, I think even for parades, that brings in all the county.
Yeah, parades is a different animal. You're blocking off a street. You're really needing to beef up law enforcement for that. It probably involves multiple departments. It's involved Public Works, barricades. That as opposed to, hey, we're doing something at the farmer's market, and it's So every I hate to say it, but every event is not created equally.
That's right.
And not every event brings in thousands of people either. So you hate to discriminate against some, but unfortunately, sometimes that's the way it works.
Well, what I understand the problem was originally that brought this up was, there was a request for a parade, and Tony gave them a fee of something like $4,000. And when we have the Martin Luther King parade, they don't charge them anything.
Right.
So I think the issue is, to me, that I'd like for you to think about, is should we specify certain parades that we already have?
Right.
Like for holidays, Christmas.
Correct.
Things like that.
Right.
And say, okay, we're not gonna charge for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you have to get a special permit, and then decide if you really want to, where Martin Luther King fits in, and I don't think we wanna charge for that parade. Make it consistent so that the KKK doesn't come in here and you're not treating them the same way you treat Martin
and if it's like
Luther
a
King.
religious event, it's like we're gonna do one church or whatever, we gotta do them all, we have to be consistent. But one of the ideas I threw out there was like, well, maybe the city or the town will cover a certain amount, and then everything after that. Well, I even talked about, well, should we grandfather some of these events? Like you talked about some of these large, like the Christmas parade, okay? I mean, you as the council, I don't feel like that's my job to do. I don't feel like that should be placed all on one person as the town manager. That's really a decision I think the council should make. These are the ones we're going to cover, because what Tanya was telling me, I think it was Tanya, or maybe it was Kim, or maybe it was Kevin, I don't remember. They were telling me, well, the town sponsored events, we would absorb those costs. And so sometimes organizations would say, well, will you come and join with us so we can be like a I'm like, they're trying to find a way to, I understand why, because they don't want to expend, but, so that's where I'm at. So I want to give some more time to this. I don't think it's an issue that has been brought to my attention. I wanted to make you aware of it. I don't know when's the last time we discussed this with the council, but as of now, we're just gonna, I think, keep doing what we're doing unless I feel like it's getting out of hand fast, and then I'll bring it back to you and we'll make a decision.
Let me understand what we're doing right now. We're not charging anybody.
We're not charging anybody right now.
I'm all right with that.
Yeah, that's what we're not doing, so.
And I'd like to bring to the table, there's only 3 parades right now that I can count up, and that's Kiwanis, Washington County Fair, and Christmas Parade, and I think the Shriner Parade is asked to come in. And I look at this as a community event. I think like Donna was talking about a minute ago, weren't you kind of thinking that they bring people in, the parades do, and
They do.
and help?
People eat.
The parades do,
restaurants.
yeah.
And they go eat in the restaurants and all
Yeah.
that, so I think that might be where Donna was going with that, but,
It's families.
you know, family oriented,
You said Kiwanis, Shriners,
Kiwanis, no, 3 that we do have, Washington County Fair,
Washington County Fair.
and, Kiwanis Club, well, that is the Christmas parade.
That's the Christmas,
That's
okay.
Christmas, and then Shriners, so there's only 3. And Shriners hadn't been able to come for some reason. One year, the road was blocked, I think interstate was blocked, so they had to run traffic through Abingdon, and they canceled the parade because they just couldn't have it, because there was a road.
And we have the MLK parade.
And the MLK parade, but I was thinking.
It doesn't
I
block
think-
traffic.
It
It
does-
doesn't generate a lot.
We use sidewalks. as
Yeah,
well.
that's just people walking down the street to,
And sidewalks.
Yeah, it's just very small.
on
Oh,
Saturday
okay.
morning.
Well, and there are on,
But I
on
think
some
it should
street.
be according to how resource intensive it is. You got the Christmas parade, which requires all the
A
fire
lot.
department and all the police
A lot.
department and all the other town offices.
Well, I think the fire department is more of, they're a participant in the parade.
Mhm.
I think the
Oh,
police,
that's true.
whereas the police, which, you know, with the police, they're actually working.
They also, the fire department.
Some of them will be in there too.
They also help block the streets.
Oh, they do, the fire department does? Okay, all
Well,
right.
we have a parade for the Washington County Fair.
Yes, and that's in August, I believe, August, September.
Another thing that we need to, while you're thinking about this, that we need to think about, in my opinion, is we block off streets very, very frequently for people who wanna go do a walk or a
Race.
5K race, and those can be very expensive.
I thought we were assessing fees for those though.
I don't know.
I don't know. I
That's
don't.
what I was just asking about the 4
We
mile.
don't for the 4 mile or
Apparently
anything?
not.
I do not know
See, I thought Tony said he was charging like $1,000 or
what
something.
what was assessed to Ballard and all that.
Cause I know the,
I think we've just been inconsistent.
It takes, for a standard parade, it takes about 40 people. And that's why we pull all the departments, Public Works, Parks and Recreation, Police Department, Fire Department, and we man all the intersections for traffic control just on Main Street. I think for Shamrock, it was like 70-some people that we had because of all Valley and everything else. Small parades. But I think last year, we also had the Highlands Festival Parade and the Shriners Parade were together last year. But I do not know that side of fee assessment. I just really deal with the
Well,
one
these
that's.
have been going on for years.
Yeah, and my point was that these are family-oriented parades, and the Shriner, especially Shriner Kiwanis Club, they're helping children. You know, that's kind of a charity thing, so you gotta give that some thought and consideration as well.
Well, I can see this as a can of worms, so I don't expect it.
inconsistent at best.
Yeah, so what I wanna do is I wanna put you and I wanna put staff in the position where when we tell somebody, we'll charge you for it, we're not treating them any differently than we are anybody else. And if there's, hey, we're gonna cover all the parades and that's what you ultimately decide, I can live with that. I got no issues with that, but we're consistent and we've made the decision how we're gonna do it and everybody can live with it and own it, so.
Again, we wanna be fair.
Yeah, just be fair. So it'll be a while. It might be something where it goes to the end of the year until I get the whole year's worth of events. But I just wanted everybody to realize that, and I'll be sending out an email to the department heads telling them to go back and listen. I don't know how many events have happened between January and now, so we can start compiling that so they don't have to go back for the whole year. So.
All right, anything else on that issue?
I think it's more a bucket of snakes than a can of worms.
Yeah, hey, they threw that at me, and yesterday I'm like, you gotta be kidding me! I gotta come in here and make.
All right, discussion regarding proposed council retreat, Mr. Moran.
Well, I'm supposed to talk about this, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. There's a retreat. Are we going to the Bahamas or where are we going? That might be against the credit card, the new credit card policy.
About Maui.
No, this is
How about
something.
the historic
Really
properties, and
far
once we
away.
get those completed, what did they see, the vision that we talked about?
Right, we had one of those, or we didn't, but you had one of those last year, I thought, or?
No,
This
it
year,
was-
We had one this year.
Yes, but it was just for the council to get to know
In
each other, but to
2019.
actually, 18.
2018, that was last year.
Yeah, but we,
I know we
don't have
covered
it
some of the
this year?
things.
Did we have that, we had it
I
this
think
year?
it was in the fall,
Oh,
wasn't
the
it?
fall, okay.
Okay, so are you wanting to do one this
But
year?
we did cover what we
Some
wanted
of
to
the
do.
things, but we're talking
The
more
capital
specific now that
Okay.
we're, yes.
You weren't there though.
So do you wanna do one this year? Is this customary that we do this every year? or-
They used to.
I think you know, I don't mind doing one. Here's the issue, we've got a capital improvements program that we're gonna have to do. And do you wanna do a retreat and that separately? That's 2 retreats. I don't know if we wanna do
And you're
that.
referring to, as far as when we start doing the capital improvements?
We've normally, the capital improvements have been like a retreat.
Oh, okay. You do that every year with the capital improvements?
We didn't
No,
do two.
it's a 5-year capital improvement.
Oh, you're talking about the.
We're overdue on.
We're overdue for one, which I talked to Ken about that, yeah.
So the question is, do you wanna do 2?
When we do a retreat, are we just go somewhere, do we go?
Somewhere in town.
Somewhere like at the community college, or we go somewhere?
The center's where we did our.
Oh, okay.
It's customary for the town manager to pay for everything out of his salary.
All right, I'm gonna ask
Well, they're really pulling the leg down.
Yeah, I know.
You can't put it on your credit card either. That's what you get for being.
I don't even have a credit card yet, actually, so.
What you get for
I'm going around asking people for money. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. If you just did one in the fall, I mean, we can do the capital improvement ones. I know that's a priority first. I'm open to anything.
I think we ought to do the capital improvement retreat first, and then decide if we wanna do anything else.
Yeah, we can always do it next spring. You know, like the early part of next year, we can decide to
But
do it.
we really do need to do that
Yeah.
capital improvement stuff.
Yeah.
So we need to move forward from what we've already decided we're gonna do for the capital improvements.
We need to do a
Add to it.
5-year plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I have, one of the ones I have upstairs is do we revisit it every 2 years or every year? Even though we put the 5-year plan together, is it something that we still evaluate and we look at
I
every?
think it's something that's required by the state, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Greg Kelly says we're overdue.
Okay,
We're supposed to have a
Okay.
5-year capital improvement program.
Okay.
I don't know if that's for the bond people or whether it's a.
It just might be a
It's
state
also
plan.
partially dependent on the comprehensive plan, which we haven't.
well, one of the things that I was talking to Jason about was, I asked him, well, do we want to do the capital improvement plan in conjunction with the comprehensive plan? Because a lot of times, some communities will make the capital improvement plan a component or an element of the comprehensive plan. I don't really care how you do it, but I thought, should we at least wait until we get further in? But then again, if we're overdue, I don't want to wait too long until the comprehensive plan is done.
What Ken told me is he thought we'd be far enough along
With the comprehensive plan, okay.
We could do it this fall. And Jason, you all are getting input on capital improvements from the infrastructure, from the staff. And-
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, Matt and I talk about things that, as far as the capital improvement plans are concerned, so.
Okay, so when, do we need to schedule it now, or do we need we're gonna decide
I
that
don't
we're
know
gonna
if we
have one,
want to schedule it. I think we should just decide
that we're gonna do one?
that we're going to do one.
Okay,
And then maybe a little further down the road.
Okay, all right.
schedule.
okay.
I can't figure out what I'm gonna do next week, that's 6 months from now. Discussion regarding Virginia Main Street and Avenue Main Street agreements.
Yes. So, there is one agreement that we have from Main Street that we do have to adopt in order for them to be recognized as a designated, or to be designated as a Main Street community. And this was that general agreement. Everybody, I think, had this at one point in time. You did have a copy
We
of
do
this?
have a copy.
Okay, so I'm just gonna recommend that we approve this. It doesn't obligate us to any specific amount of financial assistance. This is their form. I don't think we're gonna be able to negotiate what goes in and what can come out of this.
This is what the local Main Street needs with the Virginia Main Street.
Correct. This is just the standard agreement, so they can provide this to the Virginia Main Street organization.
But the
So
money is not.
the money is not listed in here. It just says that we will cooperate, we have a separate agreement with the local Main Street organization, which we've discussed making some changes to, which we'll be meeting next week with some of the representatives from Main Street.
What we're signing, what you're recommending that we sign, it doesn't say in that agreement that we've got to reach an agreement with Main Street.
It says, number 2, maintain an active public-private partnership with at least one local government in which Main Street District is located. It says an annual or biennial agreement of services to be provided by each partner is strongly recommended. It says financial, in-kind, and ongoing services should be defined in the agreement. A copy of the signed agreement should be transmitted to Virginia Main Street staff. Now, it says an annual/biennial, and it also says it's strongly recommended. So I don't see any issues, and you can chime in. I don't see any issues adopting this, saying that, hey, we recognize that we will work with the Abingdon Main Street, but we're not providing them as of now any financial assistance. You don't have any issue with this, do you? With the council? Okay.
And I think from y'all's perspective, we want them to be a qualified Main Street
Right.
organization.
Right.
And whether or not we give them money or not, but
Yeah.
I think that just facilitates this. As I recall, Carrie said that they're 6 months or 9 months late or something like that on submitting this.
I just think we have some
Yeah.
different ideas about
Right.
what they should be doing.
So I believe time might be of the essence of this, so if it's appropriate for the council to authorize me to sign this, I will do it. Are you comfortable with that? If,
We can't do that in this.
so do you not want to do that this
Well,
morning?
I don't
we
think
can,
we
but
would.
hang on. Do you want us to put it on the agenda, or do you want us to act now? If we need to act on it, we can do that.
I think you can just, I think it's up to him really. I don't know if you guys need to formally authorize it or not, if you just want to do a
Oh,
consensus.
you don't
and
know
say
that we have to.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I think,
Okay, as long as
Jimmy
I'm given
Brown.
proper directive to do it, I can authorize this.
I think Jimmy has the authority to sign
Okay.
this down.
Okay, all right. Then I will go ahead and do that.
Anybody have any objection to him signing that?
Nobody has any objections? Okay, all right, I see what you're
I
saying.
wouldn't do it if y'all didn't want him to. but I-
Yeah,
I
I
understand.
wasn't gonna do that. I understand now, so, okay, I'll go ahead and do
I
that.
just didn't know if we took formal action on
I don't think so.
Okay. I think you're right with
that.
this.
Okay, item number 8, discussion regarding historic district entrance corridor overlay district. Ken Bell.
Yes, sir, thank you. You have a handout here, and in particular, it's a subsection that we've been discussing. And as I think you may have heard, there's been some confusion and consternation from Planning Commission and from prospective businesses and existing businesses, and Jason can chime in a lot with more detail, and Mr. Bradley, of course, is on the Planning Commission as well, about, in particular, the historic district overlay corridor, entrance corridor. There's a very general provision in 8985C, and what I have given to you here in particular is C5, that tries to flesh out a little bit more detail than what the current ordinance provides. The current version, Jason, pull it up. Yeah. Now, give you a little bit better flavor of what it says, or doesn't say. And as background, and we've done a lot of research into what other places do and what they say. There are, as you know, some areas in Virginia, Smithfield, Chesterfield, and that sort of thing, that have very, very specific requirements of their historic district and entrance corridors, and a lot of them are similar to what we have done that are pretty vague. But they have the ordinance that has some description, and then typically there are design guidelines or design standards that are in a separate document that the planning department would rely on when they're going through and reviewing applications. What we tried to do here is sort of combine a little bit of each into the ordinance itself, so that Planning Commission has a little bit better direction as to what they're reviewing, as opposed to some esoteric language. And so in particular, yeah, keep going, we're going down to 5C5. So the particular one that we're talking about is 5. Architectural styles, building and roofing materials, and colors shall be shall be reflective of the traditional architecture of Abington. So we're talking about the entrance corridor here, and if you can look at the list of that, and we can talk about a little bit more about what the specific list of all the streets are, but basically any street that you can get to East Main Street by are listed in the entrance corridor, and some more than that. But traditional architecture of Abington is not defined in the ordinance, and I think if you asked anybody, you might get a little bit different answer. I think that some people could view the 200 block of East Main Street of the Virginia House and Abington House and the bank and the buildings on the corner there as the traditional architecture of Abington, the tavern. But there's only about 200 feet of that in the whole town, or the Martha Washington or the Barter, or you could say the Stuckey's at exit 17 was the traditional architecture of Abington. And then it goes on to say this may be accomplished through building scale, materials, and forms, all of which may be embodied in architecture which is contemporary as well as traditional. So those are very loose terms and somewhat contradictory. So I think that Jason in his position, and I think Planning Commission as a body, has sort of struggled with what does that mean? What do you want us to do? And so this new proposed C5 tries to go into a little bit more detail of what we're after as a proposal to you. And again, I know that y'all are seeing this for the first time, so we just sort of took a stab at it with Jason and I working on it, bouncing it back and forth, trying to come to some happy medium as to what it is that the evaluating criteria should be. Procedurally, the way this would work is if the zoning ordinance is going to be amended, council would need to refer that to Planning Commission. Planning Commission would make recommendations at a public hearing. Those recommendations would then be given to council. Council would have another public hearing, and then council could make a determination as to whether to amend the zoning ordinance at that time. So it's a bit of a complicated process, but everybody will have input and that sort of thing. But it is anticipated, depending on how all this comes about, and we can talk about these the extent of the overlay corridor, but the businesses coming into the Meadows, for instance, and then any business or new business or business that's going to change its facade would fall under this ordinance. But we know that there are going to be a bulk of new businesses in this new development that Planning Commission is going to have to evaluate, and so we're trying to give a little bit more concrete parameters as to what it is that you're evaluating. So I don't know, Mr. Bradley, if you have any more specific feedback on that, or?
I don't like having these guidelines in the ordinance. I think they ought to be removed from the ordinance and adopted by the Planning Commission as a guideline that the Planning Commission accepts. Like they do in the historic preservation. Exactly. It's not a dissimilar situation. So my advice would be just take all this out of the zoning ordinance and let the Planning Commission promulgate and adopt something to regulate their own being operation.
And I don't know if the location of where these are matters, as long as there are some, and that they're followed consistently too. I think is another issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any objection to cutting back on how far that entrance corridor extends. I think it's badly overdone, in fact. For instance, there's no reason why I think Jonesboro Road should be included in it. Although it's connected to the interstate and that's connected to Route 11, Main Street.
I think Jonesboro Road is actually one of the few ones that is properly in there.
Technically designated.
We'll disagree on that.
We could talk about that in a second. What are the rest of you?
Well, one of the things when we were running for council, you know, we heard people say, you know, it's really hard for businesses to come to Abingdon. You know, they make it so hard. So,
every day, Donna.
you hear that?
And
So I
I'm
think
sure-
it's important.
I remember us campaigning.
Yeah.
Multiple, I think everybody that campaigned wanted to make business friendly. you know.
Business friendly, make it easier. So I think this would be a step in making it, I'm not saying omit everything, I'm just saying just make it easier.
Well, I think one of the things that Cam mentioned when we talked about this last week was, I mean, there's nothing really historic about the Kroger or the, you know, the Hardee's, and so, I mean, we really need to find, I mean, actually, Jason raised a really good point about how, I think it was Jason, I'll give him credit,
Okay.
that if everything around the whole town is historic, it kind of somehow devalues the historic nature of.
That was me.
That was you, okay, that was right. And I never thought about it that way. But, I mean, I understand everybody wants to see a nice, beautiful, you know, entrance into the town. I mean, I understand it. But I think there's been some arbitrary, maybe, decisions, and so we as staff and the attorney, we're trying to make sure that we provide the planning commission with proper direction, or that there's proper authority, and there's not as much of a gray area. Did you want to at all talk about the state law? Are we gonna get to that? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I think also I know at one time, even the Virginia Department of Historic Resources would recommend that you allow in the historic district modern buildings. Because, as Jason says, if everything looks old, and it's hard to make a new building look old and really get by with it, you know, because it just doesn't look old. So allowing for modern structures within even the historic district is not such a bad alternative.
And I think, sort of building off what Donna had said, I think the businesses that have approached the town want to do business here, and they're just trying to get their architects and engineers and design people to come up with what we want. And there's, the current ordinance is so vague, then it's sort of up in the air that they don't know what to do. And Planning Commission, I think, is at the same sort of loss as to what it is exactly that we're trying to enforce. Are we trying to make everything look like the Martha Washington, or do we not care, or there is some sort of subjective element of what the Planning Commission ate that morning, and what they decide that they want it to look like? So that's the effort here, is to have some malleable but somewhat formulaic criteria that somebody can say, oh, this is what you want it to look like.
You gotta be consistent,
Right.
you can't pick and choose.
Well, there's nothing wrong with what you've done here. I think, you know, I think it's nice. I didn't like the whole thing to start with. But nevertheless, I don't think it belongs in the ordinance. I think it should be separate from the ordinance adopted by the planning commission as their rule of operation. And handle that way rather than being set in stone like we were talking about with this other thing just earlier on.
Well, we have to have it.
I think that we could do it, as Al suggested. I think procedurally, the best way to do would be to set it up this way and refer it to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission can make its recommendation as to whether to leave it in the ordinance or to adopt it, and they can make that recommendation to council, and y'all can decide what to do. Now, let me throw another curveball at you, though.
I don't really understand how, we got guidelines in the ordinance right now, right? Is that what we, okay, we would have to take those out? Is that what we're talking about?
I think what Mr. Bradley is suggesting is leave the ordinance as it is, but have the Planning Commission adopt separate design guidelines, and that's.
I'd remove those guidelines from the zoning ordinance. They don't belong there.
I thought that's what he was saying. That's what,
Well, these, what I've, oh, you mean the ones
Yeah,
that exist?
He was
All
saying to
together?
remove them entirely.
Take them all out.
I think we need something
I think we
to be the anchor,
Well, you
even
need to
if they're
say,
vague.
you need to say this, for like the planning commission shall adopt design guidelines that apply within this district.
Yeah.
So it gives the planning commission latitude to say, look, this, you know, this section about visual mass is wrong. We need to be able to constrict or widen it out.
Right.
And do it on their own without going back and amending the ordinance.
If you were to do it that way, I think you'd want generalized categories like we have here, maybe take out that section 5 or reword that in a more general way. And just to have, again, something to anchor it as the enacting statute that gives the planning commission the authority to do the guidelines.
We
There
can,
needs to
we
be
can
some
look
direction
at
from
the
that.
historic district
Yeah, I think
guidelines
you can't put it all in.
how
terms
the
of
ordinance is currently
That's
written
hard.
for the
Same
historic
thing.
district
The,
and kind of mirror that.
I'm all right with what Al's saying. Here's what I experienced on the planning commission. I don't know how we deal with this. I was on the planning commission for 2 years. And of course, we had these guidelines, and as you know, they're not very good. Depending on what individuals were on the planning commission and how vocal they were and all of that, you got a swing of interpretations from that wide. And when a certain member was on the planning commission, it drove the businesses absolutely nuts because he was a dominant figure and he brought them back 2 or 3 times on occasion. So I don't know how we overcome that, but all I'm saying is I think the council needs some kind of say, hey, look, enough's enough here.
Yeah, it's been applied to unpredictably.
Yeah, I don't know how we get around it.
Well, we don't want to discourage businesses from
No.
coming to
No,
town.
we
Sure,
don't.
we have arbitrary.
I think we need a tool that Jason can interpret and make his recommendation and let the planning commission say, okay, we don't agree with you and here's why. Otherwise, follow his recommendation. That's what we need.
and currently, all the planning commission has is the ordinance. That's it. There's no other separate guideline.
That's correct.
As I mentioned, there are some where, and some of them are beautifully done, of, 50-page document that has each individual zoning district and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and they have specific pictures of, this is what we mean by hip roof, and this is what we don't mean, and this is the color that we mean, and this is the color that we don't mean, and I don't know that we want to get that far down the road, but something better and more specific than what we have now is sort of the object. But it's, let me throw, like I said, another curveball at you though. So in looking at this, we were looking at the boundaries of each of this. Let me go back up to that. And so the Historic District Entrance Corridor Overlay District lists the following boundaries. And the boundaries are the B1, B2, B3, M1, and O and I districts on the following streets in town. And so it lists all those streets down to Court Street. And curiously, it has Thompson Drive, which is where the high school is, Law Lane, Hillman Highway, Tree Street, Wendell Road, which, and also the last one, sort of what piqued my interest in the first place, is Court Street from Valley Street to Interstate Route 81. Well, Court Street doesn't go to 81. So
Not even that direction.
I'm not sure where that came from, but actually, the Historic District Entrance Corridor Overlay District is an extension, as it suggests, of the Historic District. So that's governed by a specific statute about how a locality can define its historic district. And in entrance corridor, the locality can say, these are the specific historic landmarks or other buildings that have important historic, architectural, or archaeological, or cultural interest, any historic areas within the locality, and areas of unique architectural value, etc. This ordinance doesn't list any of those specific locations. We could list those, I'm sure, easily of what we mean if we wanted to. But in addition to that, when we're talking about entrance corridors, it has to encompass such areas or encompass parcels of land contiguous to arterial streets or highways. And then there's a sub-reference there of Title 33.2, and essentially what that means is what VDOT says is an arterial road are the roads that those apply to, and those arterial streets found by the governing body to be significant routes of tourist access to the locality or to these designated historic landmarks, building structures or districts, or in a contiguous locality. So the only arterial roads in town limits, according to VDOT, are East Main Street, West Main Street, Jonesboro Road, Cummings Street, Russell Road, and Porterfield Highway. So none of these other roads meet the VDOT criteria, which is one of the essential ones to meet for them to be included in this district in the first place.
Well, I say we make it VDOT, by VDOT.
Well, I think that the statute requires us to do this, and actually I found an article from Albemarle County where they had done something similar to what we had done. All the places in town that they could think of, they included in their entrance corridor, and people started complaining, and they looked at it and they said, oh, these aren't arterial roads, and so we can't include them. So I think that's something else that needs to be reviewed and see whether that's accurate, and if so, that we limit the reach of this entrance corridor to what's allowed by statute. And I think the answer to that is that it's going to be Main Street, Jonesboro Road, Cummings Street, Russell Road, and Porterfield Highway will be the ones that are in the entrance corridor.
What section in the ordinance were you reading?
I'm reading from the Virginia Code, actually, 15.2-2306.
So this may be a dumb question. I'm sorry.
The other question I have is, who's the main, what is the main complaint about businesses not being able to come in? Mr. Boswell, can you tell us that?
They have a really hard time in the entrance corridor deciphering what, and I don't have a copy of it, what you have in front of you. C5 and 6, being able to differentiate between what's contemporary as well as traditional.
Cities, like Wayne was saying, it's been very unpredictably applied,
Yeah.
and depending on who's there and who's vocal. it
On the plan
plays.
commission.
Right.
You know, things change. And you know, I agree, that's
Yeah. Well,
that's
the
been a
other,
problem in the past.
the other question I had, obviously this ordinance was adopted. Does anybody know why it was adopted and why it was so loose-ended? Does anybody know any information at all?
I think that was before everybody.
Oh, okay. Well, I too want to be fair about this, but what were you gonna say, Mr. Bell?
I was gonna say, and I think Al was the only one maybe who was around when this happened, but I think the impetus was to be vague on purpose so they could do what
Pick and
they wanted
choose.
to.
Yeah.
Negotiate, yeah.
And we talked about that.
And they're varying opinions, and rightly so. I mean, there's some people in town that if we could make Abingdon look like Hilton Head or look like Chesterfield, then they would. But then there's other people that if it all looked neon and glitter, that it would look like that. But I think generally just the balance of if businesses are coming to town, they just want to do it the most efficient way possible. There's some that are trademarked and that sort of thing, and they have their specific look that they're very wedded to. But a lot of people just want to know what to do.
And I think you were referring to Albemarle County, where if you go by the signs, every road there leads to Vallicello, Mickey Tavern, and Ashland,
Yes.
even if they go in the wrong direction.
Sure thing.
So I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. Based on what you're saying about the Virginia Code, does that open us up to possible litigation from a business if we try to enact this thing and it's not really?
I think if someone were to come in and say that they're on Thompson Drive and they want to put in something and we disapprove it because it doesn't meet the entrance corridor requirements, then they could say that it's invalid under this statute, yes.
Okay, that's kind of what I was
It's
hearing.
kind of what's going
That's-
on in Albemarle County right now.
Okay, well, that's what I was hearing. I mean, I just, okay, all right.
Not really a damages suit, but just something to say that it's unenforceable.
I got you.
And that section of the statute is only specific to a historic district overlay corridor. And there's,
The historic district and the expansion of the historic
It's
district.
defined in that list of streets up there.
yeah, but the state reference was to that.
The other weird thing that I'd like to point out is the Pecan Street. That's a weird situation right there. It says right there, the Pecan Street from the historic district, and that's the historic district sign, to the railroad. So there's a cutout section that doesn't even apply on that street. And, right where Mr. Barrow's place is, I think that's part of the cutout section. So it's weird because it goes behind them, I think, and, that's where we're gonna have
Yes, so
to
from Valley to,
take care
yeah,
of
the
that.
other side of the Presbyterian church, yeah, it would be like 100 yards.
Yeah,
And
And then it switches, is it across the railroad tracks that it's Green Street Road?
I think so, yeah. Oh, yeah, when it starts again, because it starts again and goes all the way down and around the curve. Yeah. I think you should just put it all in the historic district and forget about it.
And Porterfield Highway, Route 19 does not necessarily lead to the historic district.
Yeah.
It doesn't say we have to put it in all those, it just says we can't. You can only put them in those.
Right.
or-
Yeah.
It would qualify, Porterfield Highway would qualify because it is an arterial road. If you say it leads into the historic district, but
It has no, it has no real bearing on the historic district.
Right, then you don't have to put it in there if you don't want to, or the council doesn't have to. So there's-
how far down does the historic district go on West Main Street?
Down to where
West
Rico's is.
Where, yeah, where the old El So shop.
Rico's is a
Oh, okay.
little past me.
On
Yeah.
that side, on that side.
So 2 miles away from Porterfield Highway.
Field's been on
Look
the
at
other
Jonesboro Road.
Right.
It's 10 mile away.
Yeah, yeah, maybe so. So, those are the issues. Like I said, procedurally, this is for the planning commission to decide, to make a recommendation on first. I think that either today, or you can wait till the June meeting to make that recommendation, but would be to present either what I've sort of suggested here to planning commission, or make some general reference that something more specific needs to be done for this provision, but it's y'all's.
Well, Mr.
decision.
Bradley is our representative on the planning commission, so I think you know what we want, so if you'll just sort of,
Can I give them this, this material that you presented to us today as a starting point?
Yes, sir, and I can give you some more background to what I just discussed as well.
And it may take them, it may take them for, ages to come up with something they like.
Well,
Um,
if we're going to amend the ordinance, the statute on that particular provision says if council refers something to planning commission for its recommendation, then they have to act within 100 days or such time as council sets. So council could set some particular time that they want a response time. back.
Specifically to this ordinance. is what-
well, I'm just thinking with the new businesses that's coming, I mean, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna be going before the planning commission, right? Before they
Right.
can.
And do we want to delete the requirement from the ordinance itself altogether and let the planning commission establish this as their working guidelines?
Well, I think he's
Outside of the ordinance.
suggesting that you.
What about the anchor you were talking about?
Yeah, I think there needs to be something in there that
Oh,
says
yeah.
that there have to be architectural design standards.
I don't think you can give the planning commission a blank canvas.
Right.
I'm a little concerned about
No, but
the arbitrary nature.
the ordinance needs to say that the planning commission shall establish those guidelines.
Well, I don't,
Yeah, I'd
I don't
rather
know,
be a
it's a
little
little
bit
bit
more
in-
specific than that.
Okay, well, tell us how.
Yeah.
If you'd rather do it this way, then.
yeah, I think,
He's got
I think
it.
some of the things that were in the current ordinance were a little bit they were open for interpretation. And this tightens it up, but it still keeps it broad enough to where they're using some generalities.
And procedurally, if we have, this is something to start from, we can refer that to planning
And they can
commission.
decide
Planning
to-
commission can
yeah.
recommend whatever planning commission wants to recommend, but at least we have a starting point
Yeah.
now.
Right. They can review this and say, yeah, we don't like this, we're gonna recommend to the council that we add this and this and that. And then, so that can at least start the process, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that gets us off ground zero.
Is everybody all right with that? Using
It sounds like start.
Just to refer this for planning commission for discussion.
And
Is
would
that
you
what
like
we're-
to, yes, sir, would you like to set a deadline as to when they should respond?
How long do you
Let me
think?
remind you something before we do that. They've got a meeting next week on the 20th, and it looks like they have a pretty full agenda. So it may not, it may be, if you're gonna set a deadline, to respect the fact that they're tied up for the next.
What do you recommend as a
At least this
deadline?
month.
Are you on the planning commission, what do you think? What, Jason, one of you, what do you, how long do you think it's originally?
60 days.
60 days, that's what I was thinking.
What?
He said 60 days, I was gonna say
60
that
days.
sounds about right.
Let, you know,
I'm all
let
right with
them,
that. Are you all right with that, Al?
let them ask for an extension if they need it, 60 days.
Okay.
60 days from today or 60 days from first meeting?
I would say 60 days from the first meeting.
60 days from the 20th.
The larger concern, Cam, is, if I interpreted what you said, the Carter overlay ordinance, and this is entirely separate from what we just talked about, doesn't apply to anything but,
Those 5 roads that you mentioned. Yeah.
well, how are we gonna figure that out? I mean, are you sure about that, or how do we figure it out?
I can
Make
ask for a
sure that's
second
right.
opinion if you don't.
What?
I can ask for a second opinion.
We'll hire another lawyer and ask him whether.
No, I mean, I did review the
We gotta
material.
fix that. I mean, we don't wanna get sued.
Well, that's gonna have to be addressed in the boundaries of the,
Right, I think that
Yeah.
should be part of what planning commission looks at.
yeah.
Okay, well, then will you,
Will you give them what they need to show?
Well, we'll basically tell them, here are the 5 roads, and
Yes.
these are the 5 arterial roads that are even, 5 or 6 that are even applicable
Right.
based on the statute.
VDOT.
Please, what I was getting at is, their next meeting is gonna be, they're pretty well tied up, so
Okay.
can you make it 60 days from whatever the following meeting is?
Yeah, I agree with what Al is saying. It'll need to be put on the agenda.
yeah,
The upcoming
I understood
agenda. So it'll
that.
be June, so 60 days from the June.
Yeah, I understand that. but
Okay,
what-
so what do they meet? They meet just once a
So
month?
you, are
Fourth
you,
month.
Fourth Monday, okay,
Yeah.
all right. That's 60 days from, okay.
so what are you telling me, that you're gonna add,
Well, we're gonna
between
meet,
now and then, you're gonna add the adjustment to the boundaries that need to be made?
why don't we do this? The June council meeting will be prior to the June planning commission meeting,
Mhm.
correct? So why don't we put that on the council meeting for June, and I can have some specifics, and then we can take a formal vote and
Okay,
refer that
all
to.
right, that's all right with me. Is that all right with everybody?
Can you give us specifics before the meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that way we can stay.
Is that all right with you,
in
Al?
place.
Yeah, I think if it's what I heard, yeah.
I just have a quick question for Cam. So this is just the section, so what about the boundaries? Is that,
Yeah, I think we need to include that.
I think we're gonna have to include that too, because, and we're really, our basis is the statute. Okay. And then we can decide ultimately if you want to keep that Borderfield Highway in there.
I thought that's what you're bringing to the.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are we done with historic Carter overlay? Okay, Kim, come on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You take it out if you think you can.
You didn't have to talk.
That's pretty nice.
What's up with that?
Wish that was the way it was all the time.
Oh, come on.
Smooth as hell.
Take it off.
No, this is leaving it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's good to see you.
All right, I just raising the question.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we want,
Let's, Al wants to recess, so let's.
How did we
oh yeah, you can leave.
VirginiaMainStreet.com, that's the
Okay.
website.
We invite you to leave.
Is that everything? Yeah, that, one was the existing agreement that we have right now, and the other one was the one that I just signed that we'll get to.
Okay.
Signed, hasn't been signed by them.
Ronnie, you want to make a motion to go into closed session?
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Okay.
Wait, which one is it? Right here? As permitted by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A7, consultation with legal counsel, a briefing by staff or consultants about the pending case of Berry versus Town of Abington, et cetera.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bradley. Kim, call roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Crick?
Before we mention.
puts to sleep. That means he's gonna go to bed early.
Now, that's what we've been calling it.
Are we ready to make a motion? I'll make a motion that we come back in from closed session.
Motion by Ms. Patterson to come back into open session. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bradley. Any discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Mr. Bradley?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye. Now you're gonna do the certification, man.
Certification.
All right, I move that the town council certify that in the closed session just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
All right, now, let me ask you a question. He's made a motion, this is the way BVU does it. He's made a motion that covers all of us. Is all we have to do is have a second and then vote on it, or do you have to go through the certification?
We just do, I so certify, if that's okay.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. So,
Mr. Bradley?
I so certify.
Ms. Quetch?
I so certify.
Mr. Webb?
I so certify.
Ms. Patterson?
I so certify.
And Mayor Craig?
I so certify. Okay, the next item is discontinuation of department head reports. I wanted to bring this to the council's attention that, and I don't know how you all feel about it, but we get something like 130 to 160 pages of reports. It includes details about fire calls, budget information that I don't understand, doesn't make any sense to me, all kinds of stuff like that. Police reports about what they did in minute detail. I don't know about you all, I don't need all that.
I'd like to make a suggestion, Mayor.
All right.
How about we put it all on share file where we, if we wanna look at it,
That's
we
exactly what I was
can.
gonna say.
Mhm.
We won't email it out, we'll just,
No, just
I
put it
told
on
the
the share
staff.
file.
Okay.
Yeah, I told the staff that, I'd be talking to them and we would, and I told them, look, there's a lot of information, some of them read it, some of them don't. If they wanna read it, it's there. And we'll just put it on share, and I'll let you know where it's available. And if you
Well,
wanna
my
take the
concern
time.
was it's being printed out.
Well, it won't be, because it'll just be electronically on share file. And some of those reports, they have to submit to the state, so it's not like we're asking them to do a lot of information that they aren't already doing anyways.
And all the credit card statements as well, I mean. they-
I'll get that
they-
separately, I won't necessarily put them in the share, I'll figure out how to.
All right, well, that takes care of that.
Yeah.
I would like.
They were upset that you didn't care about them.
I do like your weekly report. Do you continue to do that?
Well, you like my weekly report, I
Yeah,
just
I
did
do.
one and Ken did half of it. I'm gonna continue to do that. It's gonna take me a while, it might not be as long or as detailed as Ken did it, but once, about a month or so, I'll get back up to speed, and I'm gonna be gone, for a little bit with the move and everything, so.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll continue to do that. Sometimes it might be where I don't send it out on Monday, like if it's a Friday and I'm gone, I'll just make sure you guys have it before, by Monday morning at the latest, so,
Okay.
if that's okay, so.
All right.
That work? Because you guys like seeing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
It's nice
It
to
is
know
nice.
Yeah.
what's happening.
And that's part of what, if I could kind of channel some of the stuff in the reports, and some of the operational stuff, like the calls and stuff, I agree, it's a lot of information, and, but if there's bits and pieces I can pull out of those
If
individual
there's anything
reports.
important in
Yeah.
those reports, put it in
Yeah,
the order.
yeah.
I think that would be good. Okay, next item is council member reports.
Could we go over E, or do we have to go to the F?
E?
All business matters not on the agenda, do you have that one?
That's what these two were.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Oh.
I don't have something.
Cindy, you gotta get stuff up to date, man.
I'm trying, but I don't know what, I didn't get that print off. What's wrong with you?
All right.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Mayor Craig and council, I've got a piece of business that's old, it's very simple and quick. Comprehensive plan meeting went pretty well the other evening over at the incubator. However, I would like to ask, I believe maybe Ms. Kingsley might have asked about a banner, that we might be able to advertise this a little bit more. We need to come up with some other ideas to advertise so we can get more input, more people there. I'm not sure if it was the time of day or the location. Someone said it might have been the location as well, so maybe we could move the location and also get some more.
Yeah, I thought
advertisement
about
out.
that. She mentioned that, you know, they have these banners that we put across across Cummings Street. I think if we make it that too specific, then it, like if there's a meeting coming up, we don't wanna print a banner for one meeting, cause then we've spent a lot of money on. It could be a general announcement to say, you know, comprehensive plan, go to, you know, and list a website or go to Facebook or whatever. And then that way, cause that's the best way, I think, to do outreach for meeting locations, cause everybody, but I'm open.
And we don't have to
for
do that
anything.
big of a banner though. I thought about this too. We've had a banner on the fence at the Fields Pen. I know it's not very pretty, it's a little tacky, but for just a little while to advertise, it might help with people driving by, because there might be already 2 banners hanging. So
Okay.
it might conflict the schedule.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's another possibility,
Well, I'm open to it.
because I'd like to see some more
I'm
people.
open.
We
I'm-
had several people
yeah.
there.
People are generally, it's tough to get people to come out generally to events. Everybody's busy. These are important meetings. I mean, if the
Very.
council wants to do that,
Cindy,
I can look into that, and we can do a banner.
Do you think the banner would be more effective than just simple yard signs that would put
That's,
at various locations?
that's a good idea. Wayne, I like that
I say
idea
get one
too.
sign, put out a busy intersection, and that would be my
And
recommendation.
those little step stake signs that are like 18 by 24s, that is a good idea, Mr. Craig. I like that, just for a short period of time.
Okay, so you wanna do that then instead of the larger,
Well, you could do and or and two, both if you wanted to.
okay?
I think the more advertising.
Anybody
you have-
object to doing some of that? Yeah.
I don't.
Okay, all right, well then I can just get with Jason and we can just come up with some ideas, and maybe there's a local vendor that can,
Mhm.
so if you wanna do that, we can do that.
I would like that. If
Okay.
that-
And I'll ask him
anything
if we
else?
should, because we do have, I think, a separate section on our website
Mhm.
that talks about that, and we can maybe just direct them to that. We'll try to keep as little, the more information you put on a sign, sometimes the more difficult it is to discern what it is, so we'll try to keep it as simple as we can.
We could ask Janelle to do an email blast too.
Okay.
These yard signs aren't very expensive. My idea was to, right before the meeting, before each meeting, just print out several yard signs and say meeting, place.
Oh, I see. Oh, like comp plan meeting or something like that, or, oh, I see, like directional
And
sign.
give them the date and the time and,
Oh, I see
Or
what you're
maybe,
saying.
do you
Okay.
wanna weigh in on Abingdon's future, come to this meeting or something that
Yeah.
catchy? You know,
Yeah,
Best
okay.
place would be right here at the town.
Okay,
wording is important.
yeah, I understand that.
There were a lot of emails out about that, and it was on social media, and, you know, the town's always had a problem with communicating to get
Yes.
these things out to people.
Well,
I suggested, to Tanya the other day that she could put some of these things in her, Wolf Whistle newsletter that she does, and make it easier for people to sign up for that. There needs to be a button that you push to sign up for Wolf Whistle, and it's not obvious how you do it. So I think the town could do a better job of communicating using the resources we have, and apply the signs, whatever else.
I wonder if there's a way where, and I don't know if this is something where maybe Jason can talk to the consultant, I wonder if there's a way if we could solicit feedback on elements of the comp plan online, so people wouldn't, I know we did that survey before the previous meeting, but I don't know, we just want as many people participating as possible.
Well, this would go over matters not on the agenda, a community board of something. I've been asked by a lady, a citizen, she doesn't come to the meetings, she's handicapped. She doesn't get on the computer, and I don't know if she reads the newspaper or not, but she asked, how could I get informed about what's going on the town council? And, you know, that's been weighing on my mind, and, you know, I don't have the answer for that, but we talked about maybe a community board somewhere that we could put some of this on a community board. Maybe a digital board or something, I don't know, but it has to be in the right place, and it has to be historical looking, so.
They can get expensive.
And probably expensive, but, I mean, that's just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
If anybody
yeah.
else has any ideas, I'm on board,
Okay.
you know, with ideas. Okay,
all right.
that's all I have.
Any council member reports? Derek?
been a busy month.
No, sir.
Cindy,
Absolutely busy.
Al,
6 meetings last week.
6 meetings last week? Who'd you meet with?
Everybody is
Was she good looking?
Everybody and his brother, I'm not kidding you. It's been busy.
Okay, I don't have any reports.
Oh, maybe I should say this.
I will report one thing, then. Excuse me,
No,
Cindy.
you
but
go
let-
ahead, Wayne, I'll get it later.
I went to the ribbon cutting today and got my allergies all stirred up, so that's why I'm hoarse.
Who was the ribbon cutting for?
Blue
I
Ridge.
forgot,
Blue Ridge Jeep.
Blue Ridge,
Yeah.
Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. And I want one of them big Rams to ram out of
That's what you
Volkswagen
need.
with.
Lord have mercy.
That's what you need.
I'll give my formal report at the council meeting.
All right, we're adjourned.
So how's the TV doing?
I don't know, I haven't talked to him in